Season 6 is the golden era for the Necromancer. This is genuinely the best the Necromancer has ever been, and it's not even close. I've kept up with every single build's highest pit clears and performances in the PTR, so I can give you guys the best and most accurate tier list possible. This season we have more builds in S tier than ever before, thanks to some new builds that are exclusive to Season 6. So for our first S tier build, we have Minions. Now, Minions didn't perform all too well in the PTR, but with these latest patch notes that we got, they buffed both Ring of Mendeln and Fell Gluttony to scale with our minion modifiers. This is huge, and it pushes Minions up from a mid-tier build all the way in contention to be our best build of the season. Both Mages and Golem get huge buffs this season, and I would not be surprised to see this come out as our top build of the season. But personally, I don't think it is our best build of the season. I would still give a little bit of an edge to Bone Spirit. Now, Bone Spirit has always been the go-to build ever since we changed it into an overpowered build. It's always had the best DPS, it's always had the best clears, always had the best pit clears, and that I think will still hold true. But the difference is our best builds of the season, everything in S tier, is at the same level as Bone Spirit. Everything in this tier has the ability to overtake Bone Spirit as the best build. So I would not be surprised to see Bone Spirit fall from anywhere as the best to the fourth best, which is crazy considering how good Bone Spirit actually is, and it speaks volume to just how good Necro is this season. Now, these next two builds are very new builds, so I want to take a little bit more time to explain what's going on with them and why they work. So with that said, our next S tier build is Spirit Wave with Blood Artisans, which is a build Scribblet made back in Season 4. And for those who don't know, the Spirit Wave build is a build where you use Blood Wave to generate a lot of Blood Orbs, and then use Blood Lance to collect those Blood Orbs, which is going to machine gun out these Blood Artisan procs. Now, this has always been like a relatively unknown but slept on high tier build. But the thing that made it explode both in popularity and in power into the Season 6 PTR is actually due to the stat squish. Now, to make a very long, complicated explanation short, the way Blood Artisan's working is it doesn't scale off your percent current life like it says. It actually scales off your percent maximum life. And that percent maximum life scaling is scaled off of your base life. So because our base life went from about 10k down to 4 to 5k in Season 6, it means every bit of HP that we get on our gear is giving us way more damage than in past seasons. And because of that, Blood Artisans is doing about 3 to 4 times more damage going from Season 5 to Season 6. I would put this higher, but a lot of the builds that were using Blood Artisans were also using the Lilith helmet. The problem with that is the Lilith helmet was bugged on the PTR and was giving like a 400% damage modifier. So it was really hard to tell just how good this was, but even when you don't account for that helmet, it is still insane how strong Blood Artisans is next season, and again, just like everything else in S tier, this could easily end up being our top build of the season. So it's going to be really cool to see how people really push Blood Artisans next season. So for our last S tier build, we have Unmaker. Now, Unmaker is a new helmet in Season 6, so I'll briefly describe what it does. It says whenever you gain a certain amount of essence, you will do a proc damage, and that proc damage can crit, and its damage is based off 200% of your Soul Rift's damage. Now, there's some very interesting mechanics, and Sar and I spent the entire PTR absolutely breaking this item, so huge shoutouts to him. If you want to see this build in action, I would recommend his channel. But we found that when you guarantee overpower on your Soul Rift, your Unmaker will copy all of those overpowers because it's basing its damage off of the Soul Rift. So this means when you use certain rune words or the blood boiling aspect to guarantee overpower on your Soul Rift, for the entire duration of that Soul Rift, every single Unmaker proc will overpower. A guy named Rise on the very last day of the PTR posted a video of him clearing a Pit 100 on the PTR in 5 minutes, which is on par with some of the fastest clears of other classes. So this build has the potential to completely pop off and do even more damage than Bone Spirit. The problem is it's very inconsistent, because if you mess up this very small window of timing, like your rune words, if you press your Soul Rift a little bit too fast and it wasn't ready to overpower, your damage goes from like up here all the way down to over here. So this build is very inconsistent. So some runs you'll get like those 5-minute pit 100s, and other times you'll have to restart because you were just missing your Unmaker procs. So it's a build that's going to scale depending on the player's proficiency with the build. So if you are a player who wants the challenge and it's just like, I want as much damage as humanly possible, and I will just play better to get the damage that I need, Unmaker is going to be amazing for you. But if you're not super consistent with the build, it's going to be a lot worse. But I wanted to respect how good people are going to get with it and put it as an S rank. I think if you put in the time to learn this build, it's definitely going to give you the rewards that you're looking for. So moving on into A tier, I'm actually going to be doing these two builds together because in my mind, they're pretty interchangeable. So Blood Surge is, just like last season, is by far our best speed farming content. And if you're only looking at being able to quickly farm easier content, this is obviously an S tier pick. The problem is pushing is a lot more important this season, and getting good gear is very hard this season. And the problem with Blood Surge is it's not that great into push content, and to really get it off the ground, it does take a heavy gear investment. Whereas on the other side, Blood Wave, while it might not be as fast as Blood Surge and speed farming content, it pushes pit content so much easier. You can push much farther with pits with a Blood Wave build, and the amount of gear investment it takes to get a Blood Wave build off the ground is so much smaller than Blood Surge. So you can really rank these however you want. I personally would rank it like this because an endgame Blood Surge build is the best speed farming build. So in my mind, that gives it an edge over a Blood Wave build that's just kind of like an all-rounder. So after Blood Wave, we have Sever. So Sever was unfortunately bugged during the PTR to do about half the damage that it's supposed to. But despite doing half the damage, I was still able to push up to a tier 95 with 7 minutes left, which equates to about a tier 99 pit, with only a single day of working on the build. This build that I have cooked up for Sever is insanely strong, and after they double its damage with the bug fix, which I've had confirmation that is getting fixed, this build is going to be insane. The only problem is it doesn't excel in one area, but rather is more of an all-rounder. So if you only wanted to pick one build of the season and just stick with that build, Sever is an amazing pick, and it's what I'm personally going to be pushing next season. But because it doesn't really excel in one area, I'm keeping it very reserved in A tier. And if I can push it even farther, then it might be an S tier contender, but I wanted to be conservative because we haven't been able to see the full power of Sever yet. And rounding off A tier, we have Bone Splinters. So Bone Splinters got some pretty huge buffs going from Season 5 to Season 6 with the aspect changes. And while every single aspect across the board did get buffed, the Bone Splinter aspects got buffed so much harder than everything else. And this build was already dishing out billions of DPS in single target. It's only going to get higher in Season 6 because of the aspect changes. The problem is this build struggles a little bit in speed farming content compared to everything above it. And the reason for that is because when you use Bone Spirit to get the splinters out, the splinters come out first. And if the thing that you're hitting is really, really weak, you're going to die to the splinters before the Bone Spirit ever hits. And if the Bone Spirit never hits, you never really reset the cooldown of your Bone Spirit. So it can get a little bit clunky unless you like sit yourself on top of the enemy before clicking Bone Spirit, which you can do that and it works and it makes Bone Splinters a viable speed farming build. The problem is it's kind of slow, it's kind of clunky, and sometimes it doesn't go correctly and you have to sit the 6-second cooldown, which kind of sucks. But despite that, this is still one of the best single target damage builds in the entire game for Necro, and this build is going to do very, very well when you put it in the content that it's very good against or play around its weaknesses in speed farming content. But these caveats make me kind of wary of putting it higher than anything else in A tier, but it's definitely going to be a top contender for Necro. So if you're a Splinters enthusiast, it's going to do well. So our next build is actually the only build in B tier, and that's Bloodlance. So Bloodlance is a very polarizing ability, because on one hand, you do a lot of damage when you do your big setup, which is kind of ideal for pushing content because the amount of raw damage you do is insane. The problem is, in order to do any damage at all, you do need to do that setup, which makes it very poor for speed farming. So it's a blood build that's the best blood build for pit pushing, but it's not better than the S tier builds, but unlike everything in A tier, it also can't do speed farming content. So it kind of just like sits in this middle awkward point. There were some Bloodlance builds that were doing fairly well in Hordes, which were using Blood Wave as a means to kind of like ramp up its speed. But overall, I don't see this as being better than anything in A, but it's definitely better than everything below it. So if you've been looking for a chance to play Bloodlance, it's not a bad pick next season. It's actually going to do fairly well as long as you stick to the content that it is good at, or you manage to adapt it in a way with like Bloodwave where you can kind of make it work in speed content. It won't be the best, but it will work. The same, unfortunately, cannot be said about Bone Spear. Bone Spear was something that was played actually pretty extensively on the PTR, with its highest clear going up to a 96. Now, that doesn't sound that bad, but the problem is how they were doing it. They were completely ignoring Bone Spear's personal damage, and they were all inning on Deathless Visage. And the reason why this worked was because the Essence Glyph was giving you 1000% additive crit damage, which was then turned into multiplicative crit damage with the Deathless Visage. The issue is going from PTR to live, they're having the value of all glyphs. This is a really big problem because now Deathless Visage was going from 1000 crit damage scaling it to only 500% scaling it. So it takes a huge damage hit and it wasn't even able to break the pit 100s. And the bigger problem too is Deathless Visage just isn't that good for speed farming. It lacks a hitbox directly in front of it unless you do some like jank wall setups. So it's like not really that great for speed farming, and then also isn't really going to be able to push pits either. Bone Spear is really going to have to redefine itself, and if it can find a way to become a speed farming build again, then I could see it maybe making into B tier, but overall Bone Spear is not doing too great and it kind of needs a lot more help than it currently has. So Affliction down in D tier has a lot of the same problems that Bone Spear is facing, but worse. It's another build that was gaining a lot of multiplicative damage through the additive from your glyphs. And like I said before, the glyphs are going to 50% value, so you're losing 50% of your damage overall through Affliction. And the problem is Affliction really wasn't that good to start with, because the highest pit clear that I saw with Affliction was about a 92, but it was using the Lilith helmet for a 400% damage multiplier. That was bugged and fixed, and without the Lilith helmet, the highest pit clear that I saw with it was about an 85. So yeah, this build is not going to be too hot, but it will be good for leveling, so at least it has that. And unfortunately, at the end of the tier list, we have Ebon Piercer and Infinimus, which I'm just going to group together as Shadow Dot builds. So on the PTR, Wither was uncapped, and Intelligence was double scaling, which means your Wither was getting twice the amount of value per Intelligence. And because of that, you were actually able to hit 100% chance to proc Wither on the PTR. And despite having 100% chance to proc Wither, Ebon Piercer was only able to do a tier 100 with about 4 seconds left, and that was the best anyone had ever done with Ebon Piercer. When Sirach was playing Ebon Piercer on the PTR, he wasn't even able to do a pit 95. So Shadow Dot builds, when they were completely uncapped, were still kind of struggling, but now that it's going from like 8k intelligence down to 1200 intelligence, this build's losing like 80% of its overall damage. These builds are not in a good place and they really need more help, and I'm really hoping in mid-season that we get help to the Shadow Dot archetype, because these builds are bad. They're bad early game, they're bad mid game, and they just don't scale into late game. There are definitely two builds that I don't recommend anyone really play at any point in the season until they get buffs. And that wraps things up for the tier list. I'm so excited to play Necromancer this season because we have so many good builds to choose from. The goal is to hopefully have a build guide for every single one of these builds, so if there's something that you guys really want to see, let me know in the comments, because Ruse and I will be trying to cover every single one of these. I hope you guys have a great day, and I can't wait to see you guys in Season 6.